Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a ton to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and we are trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic communities here on the YouTube space. So remember to hit that like button and also hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. And we're going to start with some Eurobasket stuff. Goga Batadze helps Georgia pull off the upset of the century, taking down Team France to advance to the quarterfinals of Eurobasket off of a 70-60 victory. Now, in this game, Goga Batadze was not that great across the board. He was held scoreless in the early portion of the game and finished the night with 8 points, 2 rebounds, and 4 assists. But listen, he had a big last 2 or 3 possessions of the game that helped seal the deal. A big time kick out 3 assists to be able to get the game pushed out of reach, and then a big time block underneath of the basket to help really seal the deal. This game was not one of his best performances throughout this tournament, but it was one of the games that highlighted that even in situations where he cannot be a takeover guy, he can still be a good decision maker and put his team in position to make good plays. Now, there was an instance during the game that was very reminiscent of the series against I believe it was the Boston Celtics, yes, where there was a little bit of a rage moment for Goga Batadze where he ended up elbowing Kristaps Porzingis. This was in the postseason matchup between the Orlando Magic and the Boston Celtics, I believe it was. And I was reading an article that actually had like brought this up that Batazde has a bit of an anger issue thing that tends to be one of the bigger things that tends to hinder him. Obviously, we've seen him kind of rage bait his coach back with Indiana. There was an incident I'm mentioning now with Kristaps Porzingis where he ended up actually bloodying KP's nose in that game too, and it put a lot more pressure on players like Paulo Banchero to fill in because of the fact that Goga was dealing with foul trouble. Well, a similar instance actually happened in this game where there was a point where he had a little bit of a rage quit moment, goes over to the sideline, starts kicking things and slamming his heads down, and kind of showing a certain sign of frustration due to the fact that he was not performing at a high level. Being able to regain his composure and come back in and close that game, even if it was not necessarily him getting the baskets. Granted, he did have a block underneath the basket that led to a transition dunk by him to help really seal the deal. Just that poise that he's slowly but surely starting to gain is going to be very important when talking about how he fits with the Orlando Magic. That's the long anecdotal way of bringing it back to how he is going to fit with this Orlando Magic team this upcoming season. Goga Batadze, I feel like, is actually going to be a lot more important than a lot of people are giving credit. I think that the overall physicality, versatility, and just pure aggression that he plays with. I don't necessarily mean that all negatively, but that certain fire that he plays with can be both a gift and a curse. Obviously, in certain situations, it can cause him to be a foul machine, and it puts him in detrimental situations. On the other end, it can make him one of the more dangerous defensive centers in the league. And when he's a high level decision maker on offense, that's a scary sight as well. Goga Batadze with this Team Georgia squad has really made me become a bigger fan of what I think he can bring to the table this upcoming season with Orlando playing with so much more expectation than normal. This team is also going to be under the national eye a lot more, and things like Goga Batadze's outbursts are going to be a subject of conversation if there's something that creates any kind of issues on the floor, right? And I'm talking about costing you a game, creating foul trouble situations that could potentially mess with the X's and O's aspect of how a game is played throughout 82 regular season games, right? In the postseason, long and behold, if a Goga Batadze rage bait situation takes place and it ends up costing the Orlando Magic in a series, right? These are the type of things that now under the national eye with these kind of expectations, now we're going to be underneath a microscope. Goga might have had a moment in this game where he showed quote unquote signs of weakness, but to come back in that game, lock in, and help his team make history, taking down Team France to move on to the quarterfinals. Something that this team has not done, I think, at all, if I'm not mistaken. This is a team that is not seeing the type of Eurobasket success that teams like Team France, for example, or Team Germany, who we'll talk about in a second, have seen over the last handful of years. So this is a big time upset for a team that is trying to make history even more as they continue through into the quarterfinals rounds. Shout out to Goga Batadze. Like I said, I think that everything I always say about Eurobasket performances has to come with a grain of salt, obviously, because it's under a different environment. But I will say, particularly in this game where Goga Batadze did not play to his best, where he's averaging, his typical 15 and 16 points a game, 7, 8 rebounds a night, and he's just kind of dominating, despite the fact that the statistics don't sound like he's just pure on running the table. He's doing it in a way where he's imposing his will on the game, right? That's not what the other night was about. But I think it's a reflection that even with him not dominating in that way, he could still be a very, very dangerous center in spot minutes and make very good decisions when his team needs him to do the most. So I think that's going to be really important for this Orlando Magic team. Very excited to see what Team Georgia does in the quarterfinal round. Another team that is going to be in the quarterfinal round is Team Germany. This team has been rolling and seems like the favorite, the ongoing favorite. And now that Team France is out of the mix, I think Team Germany is probably definitively the favorite to come out of Eurobasket with the dub. In this game, Tristan da Silva came off the bench, 4-4 from the field, 3 of 3 from 3 from 3. Love that. I've told y'all a million times with Tristan da Silva, relocation threes off the catch, the ability to slash and get to the basket at a high level, and he has to be able to defend with real intensity. Franz Wagner, 16 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal in 27 minutes. Yes, he was 4 of 11 from the field, 8 of 8 from the free throw line. I'm telling y'all, he was let me see, in a range, it says in a range of plus minus that goes up to 21, he was a plus 20. Of course, this was a game where they won 85-58. So, I mean, the plus minus is going to be a little inflated by the fact that obviously they ran away with this game where they pretty handily took down Team Portugal in quite scary fashion to stay unbeaten, quite frankly. But Franz Wagner, 8 of 8 from the free throw line. Let's talk about his translation to the Orlando Magic. I've said this on the podcast before, and I'm going to keep beating this drum until we get to the actual regular season where you can see it in person. The Orlando Magic need to see Franz Wagner become more aggressive as a slashing wing to the basket, creating and finishing through contact, both to put stress on the defense to have to collapse, forcing them to now have to pick their poison between him and Paolo, or shooters in Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bain, Jace Richardson, and so on and so forth in terms of the spacing that's trying to be created through some of the roster changes and roster advancements within the last 6 months, right? Not even that, really, the last 3 to 4 months. This team, if they can see Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero getting to the free throw line 8+ times per person, you are getting nearly 20 free throw attempts from just your star duo alone. This Orlando Magic team will be gravy during the regular season. 20 free throw attempts per game from just your star duo would be amazing. I think the biggest thing is when you look at what Franz Wagner, especially from a size perspective, is able to do as both a ball handler and as a guy who can create real space for himself, just off the fact that he is 6'8", 6'9", with real ball handling ability, ball handling upside, you have to really ask yourself if he can get to the rim and create contact on a consistent basis. This is a team that is going to be extremely dangerous on a regular basis because Paolo Banchero, with the way that he physically plays, was already anointed as one of the better free throw drawers in the league based off of his physicality alone. For context, last season, the highest average per game in terms of free throw attempts per game was 23.3 by the Denver Nuggets. 23.3. Where the Orlando Magic were last season was at 23 flat, 8th in the NBA, actually tied for 4th in the NBA with Milwaukee, Houston, Memphis, and Dallas. So this is already a top 10 free throw drawing team, pretty much with Paolo Banchero being in the driver's seat for that. This is a team that if they can get 16 free throws, 16 to 18 free throw attempts per game just from their star duo. This is a team that could lead the league in free throw attempts next season, I think wholeheartedly. And this could be a team that when it comes to the postseason could be much, much more dangerous when you talk about the physicality of the postseason, particularly in the Eastern Conference. The physicality in the Eastern Conference is a little different than the West. The West, they play a little bit more fast. There are teams that are a little bit, they are physical, don't get me wrong, very elite defensive, but I think the West is very much carried by the fact that they have so much elite level talent at the top. The East, there's so much more physicality on both sides because I feel like they understand in a sense that the talent gap is a little different and that the effort level for those teams kind of have to be raised in order to be truly successful in the postseason. It's the reason why we've seen teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers against the Orlando Magic, for example, a team that was running the table during the regular season, faced real physicality and went 7 games with an Orlando Magic team that really shouldn't have pushed them that far, really shouldn't have pushed them that hard. Once upon a time, Jared Allen said the lights were too bright in a series where they were told that they got out-muscled, right? So I think that goes to tell you that the free throw game is going to be so important throughout the season. The development of being able to get to the free throw line on a consistent basis is going to be very important for this young Orlando Magic team that needs to continue to develop a thick skin both offensively and defensively, finishing through contact, playing with physicality, being aggressive. All going to be very important. Shout out to Goga, shout out to Franz. Loving this Eurobasket run entirely for the Orlando Magic right now. Goga, Franz, Tristan da Silva, all playing well, all in the quarterfinal matchup. They don't play each other next, if I'm not mistaken, so still room. The likelihood that Team Germany will come out on top in the Eurobasket tourney is still significantly high. I think if you had to put a quote-unquote bet on it, I feel like the overlying favorite is Team Germany by a landslide now that Team France is out of the mix. But we've seen things happen before. On the other end, Team Germany literally has not lost a game since entering Eurobasket. Should be interesting to see what the rest of that looks like. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. How do you guys feel about what Goga Batadze, Franz Wagner, and Tristan da Silva have been able to do throughout Eurobasket? Of course, I've been trying to keep my update very consistent throughout Eurobasket's beginning so that you guys can kind of see the evolution of these guys within this overseas play. And we can continue to kind of learn together how these type of games can help translate to the next level when talking about playing on an NBA roster next to some much more talented teammates, but also playing against much more talented opposition. I'm really interested, again, to hear what you guys say in the comment section down below. Next, but not the last thing on the agenda, second to last, Athlon Sports wrote an article touching on the 3 Orlando Magic players who could be traded during the 2025-26 season. Very familiar names in this conversation. The first being a name that hasn't came up nearly enough on this podcast, starting center Wendell Carter Jr. The article says, while Wendell Carter Jr. has played a major role as the Magic starting center over the last 4.5 seasons, the franchise could look to upgrade their center position this season. The 26-year-old is a solid scorer and rebounder who can stretch the floor and has been a key piece for Orlando during this time with them. Due to this, the Magic trading Carter is highly unlikely unless they are able to acquire another starting center who is an upgrade over him. Is an interesting way to end that section. Because although the optimism, quote unquote, or the likelihood, I should say, around the idea of trading Wendell seems very low, how many centers necessarily are better than Wendell Carter Jr. that would even be worth considering trading him for? Would you trade him for somebody like, we discussed on the podcast, Jakob Poeltl? Would you trade him for somebody like Nicholas Claxton? I'd probably be a little bit lower on that one than traded for Jakob Poeltl. I think Jakob Poeltl is a good enough player to make that at least a conversation. Would you pair Wendell Carter Jr. in a trade package to send him back to Chicago in exchange for a former Orlando Magic star at the center position in Nikola Vucevic? We discussed that on the podcast before. Question in the comment section down below. Who is a center, realistically, that could be traded for that you believe is also good enough to be considered better than Wendell Carter Jr., enough of an upgrade to fit on this roster and help elevate this team moving forward? I think Nikola Vucevic is probably the first name that comes to mind. I think Jakob Poeltl has a very good discussion around what he could do on a much more offensively balanced team because, of course, we know that the Toronto Raptors are right there with Orlando as one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA. And unlike Toronto, the Orlando Magic have significantly addressed a lot of the shooting issues. I wouldn't say across the board, but definitely within the backcourt at least have added to their three-point shooting acumen in a way that should boost that significantly next season, right? So that's the question. The center position question is if you're going to trade Wendell Carter Jr., who do you get that not only is better than him, but that fits within the ideology of where the Orlando Magic are going? Nikola Vucevic, especially with the fact that he shot, I believe it was 40% from beyond the arc on around 4 or 5 attempts per game last season, gives you stretch big ability, maybe not the best rim protector compared to a Wendell Carter, but much more reliable as a floor spacer than Wendell Carter. He may be the only name that comes to mind as quote unquote better than Wendell that's also truly attainable, right? We can't get too crazy when we're talking about some of these centers that could be on the market that, the Orlando Magic have no business putting their name in the hat for, whether it be financially or what they bring to the table. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below because I might be missing somebody. Next, a name that's come up plenty. Jonathan Isaac. Jonathan Isaac has dealt with a ton of injuries over the last 8 seasons of his NBA career, including missing 2 full seasons. Despite that, the 27-year-old forward suited up for 71 games last year and played a key role off the bench. While that was the case last season, Isaac's injury history and hefty contract, which is, basically about 15 and 16 million a year, pretty consistently through. I think that average salary is pretty consistent through his entirety of the contract, and I believe he has 2 to 3 more years left even beyond this season. It could it could create a situation where the Magic at least have to shop him on the trade market if they elect to move him, if they considering that they receive the right offer. Jonathan Isaac, I think, is a little bit different than the Wendell Carter situation. Yes, he played 71 games last year, but again, as the article mentions, the injury history aspect of Jonathan Isaac is something that should go to let you at least consider seeing what he is valued for on the open market. If you cannot get a first for him, I feel like you have to consider keeping him. If you cannot get a player that is equally as talented as a shot blocker and rim defender as Jonathan Isaac, which is a very minuscule list, I should say. He plays spot minutes, but in a very minuscule list of centers / power forwards that are as good of rim protectors as he is. If you cannot get that return, the only thing that should make you cause to pause is if you feel as though the injury history is going to be too much of an anchor in a season that is way too important to be derailed by injury-prone players, right? Now, that's a little bit unfair and a little disingenuous to just bet on the fact that the guy's injury prone, so let's trade him before he gets injured again, given the fact that he's coming off such a strong production season where he only missed 11 games. On the other end, this season is so important in terms of where their stature in the Eastern Conference is, given the fact that this season is set up to be favorable to the Orlando Magic just in terms of their competition across the rest of the Eastern Conference standings. You might not want to risk your center depth being hurt by Jonathan Isaac missing significant time. You not being able to, you can trade him injured, but it'll be much more difficult to trade him injured when you also pair his contract into the mix. I think it's something to keep in mind. Not necessarily sure what center comes to mind, not necessarily sure what power forward comes to mind. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. We've talked about a lot of different guys, but I want to hear from you if there are any power forwards or centers that you even think are worth considering. I think J.I. is pretty well beloved and protected within the Orlando Magic fan base community. From everything I've seen in my comment section, it seems like Jonathan Isaac is actually a lot less likely to be traded, or fans want him to be traded a lot less than a player like Wendell Carter, for example. But again, I think the importance of a season like this one could have a real big influence on the decisions around putting anybody on the trade block this year. And the last player on this article was somebody I actually slipped up and mentioned a little bit, but a guy that I think is just clearly on the trade block, Dwight Howard. Clearly on the trade block. drafted at number 11, a guy who honestly has not really produced very much so far, and despite being considered a knockdown three-point shooter coming out of Michigan, has not been a knockdown three-point shooter in the league, both either for the main squad or really didn't even kill in the G League in his time down there either, as far as I'm concerned. And it's not that he played a lot of time down there. He played nearly 12 minutes a game for the main team, so he's pretty well featured as he played 60 games last year. But personally, I mean, I don't know what his upside is. I think if you can get away with a second draft situation similar to, let's say, no, not Kevin Knox. Kevin Knox is a good example, but let's say, who's a better player for this? You can think Harry Giles. You could think I think Mark Williams right now being moved to the Phoenix Suns is going to be a really good second draft situation for him. A perfect example for both the draft status of where he was taken, the upside of what he's expected slash thought to be theoretically, and then team fit might be a team that wants to take a swing on Jet Howard, similar to how a handful of different teams have taken a swing on Cam Reddish, maybe. Maybe that's a better example. If you can get a team to think that they can kind of do a second draft revival of Jet Howard with more minutes, more opportunity, and get a first, even if it's a late first, if you can get a late first or two decently rated seconds for Jet Howard, I think you pack his bags. Personally, I think you pack his bags for him at that point. I think anything lesser than that really depends, because I think anything lesser than that makes it where you would likely just keep him for the potential upside or keep him for the potential of being able to pair him with another player in a draft package, in a trade package, as opposed to just moving him on his own. So those are the dilemmas that you come into, especially with the fact that Jet Howard is not owed a lot of money, but you have to consider Jet Howard as a potential trade option, also given the fact that he is up for a contract extension this summer. So he is playing for a potential chance to stay on the team, given the fact that the team option has not been picked up yet. So we're really talking about a true extension if he can play himself into it. The likelihood of that, I think, is relatively low, especially with the arrival of Jace Richardson, as I've said. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jet Howard's not on this team by the trade deadline. Last but not least, we have to end on some very hype news, guys. We have known for a while, but now it is officially stamped. Dwight Howard is a Hall of Famer. Multi-time DPOY winner, multi-time DPOY candidate, multi-time All-Star, multi-time All-Defensive Team player, NBA champion now. Granted, not with the Orlando Magic, but nonetheless, just want to make sure I'm hitting all my points here when it comes to how special of a player Dwight Howard truly was. I wanted to end this podcast with Dwight Howard because not only, of course, is it a huge news that he's officially a Hall of Famer, right, joining that class, that 2025 class, but I think people really truly forgot how good Dwight Howard was at the peak of his powers, particularly with the Orlando Magic. I think his stint with the Lakers was his first real ego hit within the media, because if Kobe didn't like you, it was hard for a lot of people to want to rally around you. I think when he tried to redeem his career next to James Harden, they were in a really interesting situation because that team really did underperform on a consistent basis, given that he was still so good on both sides of the floor. Now you have a all-star MVP caliber point guard, and you have this team that's built in this pace and space platform, shooting threes, running gun system, where either shooting threes or throwing lobs, right? And that's perfect for a Dwight Howard guy who is, 6'10", 6'11", can jump out the gym, one of the most physically imposing centers in NBA history, and they underperformed, right? You get traded to, Atlanta, have a cup of coffee there. You have a Charlotte Hornets jersey nobody really wants to talk about, right? You go to the Lakers again, and you're successful within a season that, of course, a lot of people will dub a Mickey Mouse year, but nonetheless, you were a contributing factor because it wasn't like he was just on the bench soaking up, good energy and vibes. He was a contributing factor to them going on that championship run in the bubble, right? Dwight Howard may have one of the more underrated careers in NBA history. He didn't make the top 75 list. Thought that was a little bit atrocious. Um, this is a guy who I think is going to slowly but surely, or at least I say hopefully, should receive a lot more respect now that his name is mentioned in this echelon with other Hall of Famers. Dwight Howard is a guy that, particularly when he was in the Orlando Magic uniform, was once discussed for multiple years as one of the top centers in the league. It was always, I remember on TNT with Shaq, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, those guys, they would always have these debates about like the center style and what you prefer and different things like that. And the names that would always come up was like Dwight Howard, Brooke Lopez back when he played with the Nets, and like Andrew Bynum, peak of his powers, Andrew Bynum when he was playing with the Lakers. Those were like those were the names that were considered heavily when you're talking about the best center in the game at the time and what style you preferred and different things of that nature. Did Dwight Howard ever reach the true potential of being a number one pick, a Shaq, you know, understudy in a sense? Obviously not directly, given the fact that they've had beef for years up until about this year. But a guy who tried to mold himself within the Shaq archetype, no, he did not live up fully to the expectations of everything that came with what he was believed to be coming out of high school. But he did achieve a ton. He did set a real precedent for what a rim running, rim defending, shot blocking center should look like. And he backpacked the Orlando Magic to an NBA Finals where, genuinely speaking, you could make the argument that they were the better team in the series. Not necessarily in terms of how they produced, but in terms of talent on the floor. You can make the argument. Obviously, that's Kobe Powell. Andrew Bynum's on the team. I mean, there's a lot of talent over there. But Orlando has some hitters too. So shout out to the Orlando Magic franchise for being the team that Dwight got to show his true Hall of Fame career the most, show off the most at. And shout out to Dwight as a newly inducted Hall of Famer for now hopefully earning the respect in the top 75, top 100 players of all time discussions that I feel like he's been left out of quite comfortably by the media and others for some time now. Dwight Howard is slowly but surely going to start getting a lot more respect in his name, and it's well deserved. But with that being said, this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And I will see you guys again tomorrow with hopefully some more interesting news. But until then, peace.